Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's meetup. On today's agenda, Chris and Scott will be providing an overview of crash and traffic planning maps and apps. With that said, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Scott.
Okay, thanks, Heather, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Today, Chris and I wanted to take a few minutes to share with you the crash and traffic planning maps and apps we've developed as part of the ArcGIS for Local Government solution. And before we dive in and really spend the bulk of our time going through the solutions with you, I wanted to set a little bit of context. So one of the things we noticed, and one of the things we've been hearing from many communities across the country is that they have been beginning to expand their traditional transportation planning activities to include larger, more all-encompassing mobility initiatives. And typically what we've seen is those initiatives kind of manifest themselves under two headings. One is a whole series of activities to design complete streets for the community, where you're taking into account and enabling safe access for all users of the traffic and transportation way. And so that's more than just the traditional vehicular vehicles, to also include bicyclists, motorists, and other transit forms. And larger communities are also beginning to undertake initiatives called Vision Zero. And the whole motivation behind Vision Zero is to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries, and ultimately develop a transportation network that can be used by all, much like the Complete Streets initiatives we've seen in the communities as well. So about a year and a half ago, the city of Austin approached us because they wanted to evolve their Vision Zero initiatives to include a collection of map-based applications to help them understand the extent of traffic fatalities in their community and ultimately begin to drive a series of constituent engagement apps that they can use in their educational purposes. And through that partnership, we developed with them a collection of maps and apps that can be used to identify roadway hazards and dangerous traffic behaviors. And ultimately, what that collection of maps and apps allows communities to do is analyze crash data that they've been accumulating in their organization, and essentially inventory non-vehicular and other traffic control assets that are part of your larger transportation planning activities. In addition to just looking at empirical crash data, what the traffic fatality solutions also allow you to do is solicit feedback from the public to begin to gauge sentiment where the public may find dangerous traffic behaviors occurring, and then develop a set of educational map-based applications that allow you to share high-risk roadways with the community, and also allows the community to explore serious injury crashes, begin to see where those crashes may be occurring and what mode of transportation was used during those crashes. So with that context in mind, that brief context in mind, what I wanted to do now is turn it over to Chris and let Chris really spend the bulk of our time today just showing you the solutions that are available, and then we can take some questions. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Scott. So first I want to start with where you can find all these solutions that I'm going to be demonstrating today, where you can find them, learn more about them, and learn how you can deploy them into your organization. So you can find these solutions at solutions.arcgis.com. If I come down to local government, inside of public works, we have a feature page on reducing traffic fatalities. So if I go in and learn more about that story, I can find the maps and apps that are available as part of this feature story. Some of the web-based applications have a view application link, which takes you to the try it live version of the application, which is what I'm going to be showing today. So this gives you the opportunity to play around with the application and see what the behavior of it is and what the experience would be for users inside the organization as well as the general public. You can also click to learn more, and that's going to take you into more detail and help about that solution. You'll learn what are some of the software requirements to stand up that solution. And you can also walk through the getting started on how you can deploy that solution into your organization. So the first solution I want to demo today is our crash analysis solution. And crash analysis is a configuration of ArcGIS Pro that can be used by public work agencies to analyze crash data in intersections where concentrations of serious and fatal crashes occur. In many communities, a high percentage of severe injury or fatal crashes occur on a small percentage of the streets. Sometimes this is called the high injury network. The results generated from the crash analysis can be used to plan capital improvements that can lead to safer roadways and intersections. So when you get the crash analysis solution, you're going to get some sample data and some layers, but the primary thing that you're going to get is a toolbox that offers some tools that allow you to analyze your crash data. The toolbox implements two methodologies that are well established in the industry. And they help you analyze your crash data and assess the risk along your transportation network. And they can guide the prioritization of infrastructure improvements and targeted enforcement strategies in your community. So the first protocol or methodology that I want to talk about is the United States Road Assessment Program, or US RAP. One of the advantages of this methodology is it uses roadway and traffic control feature data to assess risk, and it's better at accounting for rural areas with lower traffic volumes or limited or unreliable crash data. The ways it's able to do that is by the tool set walks you through three tools. The first tool is conducting a basic segmentation on your transportation network. So it attempts to dissolve and merge streets together that share similar characteristics, such as similar number of lanes, similar speed limit, similar access onto the roadway, so that you're comparing apples to apples when you're analyzing the risk. The next tool is going to assign the crashes to the nearest segment, and it's going to attempt again to assign a certain number of crashes to each segment. So this is where it really helps in those rural areas where you may not have as much traffic volume or as many crashes. It's going to merge segments together as best as it can so that you have a certain baseline number of crashes that you're assigning to that roadway. So when you do the analysis and you're trying to find the more risky roadways, you're comparing roads that have at least some level of data associated with them. And the final tool is going to create your risk maps. So these risk maps are going to have layers that identify the roads that have the most frequent amount of crashes, the roads of a certain type that if you limited the number of crashes would have a significant impact on the number of fatalities in a reduction in the number of fatalities in the community, and a couple more that you can walk through with the tool. So it's a great tool set, and it's, like I said, it's following that US RAP protocol and implementing all the logic and the study that went into defining that method of analysis. The other tool set is based on the Federal Highway Administration network screening. And the advantage of this methodology is it only requires that you have the location of the crash and the location of the street or intersection. That's all you need in your data. You don't need any other metadata on the streets to be able to perform the analysis. But you can also optionally have an average daily traffic volume along the streets, so to normalize the number of crashes that occur relative to the number of vehicles that travel along that roadway. And you can also include a weighting for severity. So if you want to weight fatal crashes higher than property damage only crashes, you can do that. And that's a common approach that some communities take when trying to understand the severity of the crashes during their analysis. So I'm going to run through the calculate crash rate tool. The first parameter is the location of your streets or intersections. So in this example, I'll do streets. The second parameter is the location of the car crashes. I'm going to specify a time range. So how many years or months or days of data do I have for the time range of crashes? This is so that when I produce the output in the tool, we can identify the number of crashes that happen along the roadway per year, for example. Snap distance is the maximum distance I'm willing to have the crash snap to the nearest street or intersection. So I can provide that. Optionally, I can provide a weight field. So in this case, I'm going to use severity, which I have a domain on that field for the type of crash. If there was any fatality associated with the crash, it's a fatal crash. If there was any incapacitating injury, it gets that designation. So some cases we might want to weight fatal crashes higher than incapacitating injury. Just a non-incapacitating injury will give 1, and we could eliminate no injury crashes from the analysis by giving it a weight or a value of 0. I can also optionally provide an average daily traffic volume along the street. So how many vehicles per day travel along that road segment or through that intersection. And finally, I can give it an output name and hit run. So what this tool is going to do now is snap the crash to the nearest roadway, and it's going to calculate some statistics. It's going to count the number of crashes that occur along each segment. In the case of me providing the average daily traffic volume, it's also going to give me a weighted or a normalized value divided by the number of cars that travel along that roadway. And it's also going to give me a weighted value because I provided the weight there. Sometimes we get questions from different communities about where do you get this crash data? I'm not really sure how to get access to this type of information. And what we've commonly found is we've seen it in 2 places. Sometimes the public safety has it in their record management system. They have that information. And oftentimes communities are required to push it up to the state Department of Transportation, where they aggregate it all together and keep track of that information. And sometimes you can work with the state to get that information for your area of interest, your local municipality or your county, for example. And then if you have access to your streets data or your intersections, you can use this tool to run that analysis. So it's creating the crash layer here. This, depending on the amount of data you have, can take, I've seen it 30 seconds. It can take a couple minutes. So it kind of varies just on the amount of data. For me, it took a minute and a half to run. And what we get out in the result now is we're going to get those same streets, but they're now going to have additional attributes added to the street segments. So then I can visualize the streets in my community that have the highest frequency of crashes along the roadway. And what I'm going to symbolize here is I want to show the streets that have, let me get rid of this. I'm going to symbolize the streets that fall in the top 20% in terms of crashes per mile per year. I'm going to symbolize those in red. The streets that are between 40 and 20%, I'm going to symbolize in yellow. There we go. So this represents, in my community, the streets that have the highest frequency of crashes along them. The red are the top 20%, yellow is top 40%. If I take a look at the attribute table for that output layer, right now we're symbolizing based on the crash frequency, which is the crashes per mile per year. We also have crashes per million vehicle miles. So this is the normalized value. It's normalized by the number of vehicles that travel along that street segment per day. So in just using frequency, I'm probably going to have my highways and major roads will have the most crashes. That just makes sense. But there's more cars traveling along those ways. So if you have average daily traffic volume, it might make, what are the odds that there will be a crash along a roadway given the amount of vehicles that are traveling along that roadway. We also have their weighted crashes per mile per year. So this is taking each crash, and you can see for this particular road that there's a null output. What that's telling me is there were only non-injury crashes along that street, so they've been ignored in the output. But there are some where we're weighting it based on the value of your incapacitating injury. So this would allow me to find the roads that most frequently have fatal or high injury crashes. And at the same time, we can also normalize that by how many vehicles are traveling along that roadway. So this output is often referred to as the high injury network, or the roadways in our community that represent the roads that most frequently have fatal or high injury crashes along them. And the next step in this process is I might want to share this information out and make it available within my organization and to the general public. And to do that, we're going to use the next application that I want to show, which is the High Injury Network Locator application. So the High Injury Network Locator is a configuration of Web App Builder, and it's using the Near Me widget, and it can be used by the general public to locate streets or intersections where concentrations of serious and fatal crashes occur. So like I said, the public works or law enforcement would typically run that crash analysis to generate this high injury network. And then they would publish that layer and deploy this application to help educate the community on where those locations are, where are the more risky streets and intersections in the community. And the way you can use this application is I can search for an address, or I can click on the map, and it's going to buffer that location and return to me within 1 mile, or I can expand it further, the streets and intersections that fall in that high or medium to high risk bucket. And I can click on any of those street segments and it will zoom it to me, and I'll get some details of the stats that were provided. So this is how many crashes per mile per year occur along that roadway. This is how many crashes occur per every million vehicles that travel along the roadway. So it's really it's designed to be a publication education application. You could see wrapping this in a story map and providing a little more context of as a community, we've identified these roadways. These are the locations that we're looking to improve upon through capital project or improvement plans to make the streets safer, or through enforcement by having more police out there watching and potentially patrolling those locations to make sure that people are demonstrating safe driving behaviors. These are the types of efforts that we're taking to make these streets safer. The next application that I want to show is the fatal and serious injury dashboard. This was also a popular application that we saw in the community when we were doing research of other cities who were implementing a Vision Zero initiative, is they wanted a way for people to be able to explore the particular car crashes that resulted in a fatal or serious injury. And they wanted to provide a way to tell a story around those things, much like that high injury network locator, and allow the citizen to explore the data both around their home or where they work, just so that they understand the importance of demonstrating safe driving behavior, because it's focusing not only on motorist fatalities, but also pedestrian and cyclist fatalities or injuries. So what I can do with this application is I can pan around. What we're going to see as we move to different extents is you'll see the graphs update and the counts. So we're showing the frequency of crashes by day of the week, month of the year, and hour of the day. And we're also just providing a count here in the bottom left. So if I zoom around or zoom out, all of it updates dynamically to reflect the features that are within the current extent of the map. I can then also begin to filter the data. So let's focus on pedestrian and bike cyclist and look at fatalities. So these were the fatal injuries that resulted from a car crash to pedestrian and cyclist. This data is, I think I have around 5 years of data. So what I can then also do is I could begin to filter this down. So let's go a couple years back and look at today. So we can then filter by date as well. And with any of these, I can click and get a pop-up of some additional information. What you provide in here is kind of up to you in terms of the amount of information. It could be kind of as limited as what I have, or you can expand it. We saw an interesting kind of example that LA put out where it was kind of a dashboard dedicated to the individual who passed away as a result of the crash. It was really trying to put a sense of these aren't just numbers. These are people who suffered a fatality due to traffic incidents, and why it's so critical and important that we're taking efforts to make our streets safer. So it could be an opportunity as well for other communities who want to provide that level of information. The last application that I want to show is the Vision Zero application, which is the configuration of crowdsourced reporter. And it can be used by the general public to report transportation hazards or dangerous traffic behaviors along the roadway. So it's typically deployed by a public works agency or law enforcement to enlist feedback from bikers, drivers, and pedestrians who are using the public streets. And so this feedback, along with crash data, is analyzed and used to educate the community, devise new enforcement methods, and promote engineering practices to reduce those traffic fatalities. So where crashes are actual incidents that are recorded, we all know if we've been in a busy city or we're walking along sidewalks that sometimes somebody blows through a stop sign or they're speeding along, and you just don't feel safe as a cyclist, or you don't feel safe as a pedestrian. You weren't involved in a crash, but maybe they just missed you. Those are things that we want to capture as well, because we're not just only interested in things that ultimately related in a crash, because a near miss is just what it is. It's something that almost resulted in potentially a fatality, if not at least a serious injury, but it's not captured because the incident didn't actually happen. So this application is promoting people to provide their experiences related to that, and also just kind of record their sentiment. So there might be just areas they avoid because they don't feel safe walking that direction because of the design of the streets. There's an unprotected crosswalk, or it's not easy to get across the street. So we really wanted to provide the community the opportunity to provide their feelings about the transportation network and how they get around the community. So I can launch the application, and what I'll see is reports by other people in the community about particular problems that they observed. So in this, for example, here's one where there's a long wait to cross the street. I can add my comments. So I could add totally agree, provide my name, and submit the comment. And so now my comment is attached to it. I can also vote or say I agree with it. And what you see here on the right-hand side is the number of people who've agreed with that particular comment about that area. So rather than everybody submitting their own unique report, you can see other reports by people in the community, and you can add your own comments or vote them up if you agree with the concern. Or if nobody's reported the particular issue that I'm interested in, I can submit. So in this example, we're going to ask for some details. So I was walking. I saw, let's say, long distance to cross. So that's common. And that can be a dangerous situation if you have to cross a long distance across a roadway, potentially busy, which is a common place you need to cross. That's an area where there could be a crash or an incident. I can provide some additional details, my name, phone number, email, I can also attach a photo. So if I want to attach a photo of the crosswalk, I can do that. I can search for the particular address, or I can click on the map and hit report it. And so now it's added my detail, and my report will be on there that I just logged. And others can come in and agree or submit it, agree or add a comment. So after I've submitted that request, we also provide an application that allows you to triage and manage those reports. That's using our crowdsourced manager application. So you could assign them to safety, you could assign them to public works to look into ways to improve that particular area, and you can keep track of the status of the work that's going along with that individual report. You can also access a dashboard that we've configured on top of that. So it's using those same reports, but allows you then as inside the organization. So this is designed for public works or law enforcement to get an overview of the reports that are coming in. I can start to filter by things like people who are biking. What is the status? So are there currently in the submitted phase? So I haven't indicated that I've received them or I'm doing anything with them. I can also filter by the date it was observed. Now, if I click one of the items, I can zoom to it and get a pop-up with more information about what was going on relative to that report. So that's the dashboard application that goes along with Vision Zero. So this comprehensive citizen submits a report, you triage it within your organization, and then you monitor the status of those reports through the dashboard. So the final thing I want to touch on in the demo is our inventory right-of-way assets set of solutions, which is a collection of Collector for ArcGIS solutions that allows field staff to inventory key assets in the public right-of-way. During the development of these solutions with Austin, we found that there were key aspects of a community's transportation network that we weren't accounting for. So, for example, for non-vehicle traffic, we added a new collector configuration for cycling infrastructure in the community. So this allows field staff to capture the location of bike parking, bike share stations, and bike ways, so that you can go out in the field, collect those, and you can have that as part of your analysis when you're looking at crash analysis in ArcGIS Pro. You can also share that out in your web applications as part of your transportation network. We also added a new configuration that allows you to capture traffic calming devices. So these are things like speed bumps and narrow traffic lanes that are designed to reduce traffic flow and encourage safer, more responsible driving. So these are some capital improvement projects that you might take on to install these traffic calming devices in particular areas where you believe the crashes are a result of high speeds or drivers not paying attention. By installing some of these devices, you can help reduce that and prevent additional fatalities from occurring. So this collector configuration allows you to perform an inventory of those assets that already exist within your transportation network. So with that, I'm going to take a few minutes to answer some questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott to go through a couple more slides.
Yeah, Chris, why don't we stay there just in case anyone's got something? Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Just in case Heather, do we have any questions?
No, we do not.
No, okay. So no questions. Maybe give everyone a second to see if they do have any questions or thoughts on what we showed.
Sure.
So I just want, before Chris takes some time to show you how you can deploy these traffic planning and crash analysis solutions in your community, I want to take a few minutes to just highlight a couple of things he talked about. The first is the crash analysis methodologies. And going all the way back to the first demonstration that Chris showed, you know, one of the things that's important to realize with the crash analysis solution is that we've actually incorporated 2 standard analysis methodologies into ArcGIS and shipped them as part of the core product. And Chris talked a lot about the value of these 2 protocols or 2 methodologies, the first one being the US RAP, or road assessment program, and why that is valuable for statewide analysis or maybe larger geographies where you have lower traffic volume and limited crash data. But there also is this Federal Highway Association network screening methodology that we typically see used in more urban areas because they can assign the crashes to street intersections, and you can calculate a crash frequency directly and then normalize that with traffic volume and or severity of crash, right? And so as you start to take advantage of these solutions, you can have the confidence knowing that those two methodologies that are shipped in the core product are backed by the Federal Highway Association and ultimately used by many traffic engineers and transportation planners throughout the country. And then the result of that work is what Chris referred to as the high injury network, right? Which is that subset of the transportation network that allows you to visualize streets and intersections where there were large concentrations of fatalities. And Chris showed how you can use that in the high injury network locator application. He also referenced how that could be part of a larger story map that you're using to present transportation challenges throughout your community. And ultimately that can be shared with the general public in an application like the high injury network locator, or in a story map internally that you may use to justify capital expenditures in your community. And so it fits very nicely into the education programs that you develop as part of your Complete Streets and Vision Zero initiatives in your community. So those are two key things that I think are just important to highlight as a part of the demonstrations that Chris showed. So go ahead, Chris, I'll let you take it from here and you can show them how they can deploy those solutions in their organization.
Thanks, Scott. To help you deploy ArcGIS solutions in your organization, we've created an add-in for ArcGIS Pro that will walk you through discovering the solution offerings, allow you to select from the list one or more solutions, and click Deploy. And this will lay down the services, maps, and apps required to use that solution. We also provide some steps and some tools to help you configure that solution to meet your specific organization's needs, like adding fields or adding and modifying domains. And if the solution requires it, we also provide a tool that walks you through loading data into those layers that we lay down during the deployment. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that solutions deployment tool works. So on solutions.arcgis.com, you can download the solutions deployment tool. And when you get the add-in, you can double click to install it. And after you install it, when you launch Pro, on the Share tab, you'll have a new button called ArcGIS Solutions. When you click that button, it's going to open a task in your project, and this task is going to walk you through the process for deploying a solution. The first step is to sign into your organization. By signing into your organization, you're specifying the ArcGIS Online organization or portal that you want to deploy these solutions to. Once you've signed in, you can now move to the Deploy a Solution step. What you're going to see is a catalog of solutions that are available for you to deploy to your organization. They're grouped by industry, so we can explore those solutions that are available for local governments by expanding that list. We can also search by a keyword, or we can filter by a type. So let's go ahead and look at the reduced traffic fatality solutions that we've been talking about today. So here are all the solutions that I demonstrated for you today. That Pro project package for crash analysis that allows you to analyze your crash data. The fatal and serious injury dashboard that allows you to explore the crashes that resulted in a fatal or serious injury. Higher injury network locator that allows you to publish out and share those results of the crash analysis to generate your high injury network. And then the Vision Zero application along with the manager and dashboard configuration that allows you to solicit feedback from the general public on areas in the community where there are dangerous traffic behaviors or hazards. So once you've found the solution or solutions that you're interested in deploying, you can select them, specify a folder in your content that you want to create these solutions in, and hit deploy. And so what's happening now is the add-in is deploying, in the case of the dashboard, it's going to deploy that dashboard application. It's going to deploy the web map that's used by that dashboard, and it's going to deploy the feature layers that are used in that web map. In the case of the fatal and serious injury dashboard, we have one feature layer, traffic crashes, and a view of that feature layer, traffic crashes public. And the idea there is the traffic crashes would be internal to your organization and have editing enabled so you could load data into those layers. And the public view is actually used by the web map, and that's what you would share publicly, non-editable to the community so that they could visualize or view those traffic crashes. So once it completes, you get a green check mark. You can click it, and it will take you out to your content. It will actually take you out to that dashboard that was created in your org. So I can click View Dashboard. And what we'll get is essentially a configuration, that same configuration that I demonstrated earlier of the dashboard, but we're not going to have any data in it because we've laid down new empty feature layers into your org. The web map is going to default to the extent of your community. So if you set your organizational extent, it will use that extent. But really, to start working with this, we're going to want to configure it and load our data in so we can start to use it. So I'm going to go back to Pro. One of the first things I like to do to make this process easier is I'm going to add the layer that was created by the deployment tool into the map. So I can browse into my content. I created it in the traffic crashes folder, and there's those two layers I talked about. There's the public view that's non-editable, that's used by the web map, and then the source layer that is editable, that will only be internal to my organization. So I'm going to add the internal original layer so that I can edit it and append records to that layer. So when I add that layer, it's going to be added to my contents, and now you can see that traffic crashes layer, and it's symbolized by the mode of transportation. If I go back to the tasks, now I'm going to take a look at some of the other steps in this process. Next, I can start to configure the solution, and this is where I have an opportunity to add additional fields. So if I have different additional information associated with my traffic crashes that aren't in the layer that gets laid down, I can select that traffic crashes layer and add one or more fields to it so that when I load my data in, I have something to map those additional fields to. You can also modify the domains, which is common in this example because this layer has a lot of domains associated with it. We have a domain for the severity of the crash. We have a domain for the mode of transportation. We have a domain for the day of the week, month of the year, and hour of the day. And so depending on your source data, you might want to modify these domains or update those domains. If you add new fields that have domains, you might want to add domains to those new fields. But this allows you to configure those domains on that layer. So when you're done configuring the layer, the final step is loading data. And in some cases, you may not have to do this step. For example, that Vision Zero application that's intended to enlist feedback from the public doesn't require any original data because users are going to just submit new reports of dangerous traffic behavior to the application. You don't need to seed it with existing content. So that makes that easier. You don't even have to do that step. But in the case of this dashboard, I do have some traffic crashes that I want to load into the layer in my organization. So I'm going to select my crash locations as the input and the traffic crashes as the target data set that I'm loading into. In this case, my schema matches exactly, so I don't have to do any field mapping. But if there were differences, I could do that within the field map. So for example, if my street name was named something else, I could select a different field from my source to map it to. If I had new fields, I could append those as well. But within the fields, your opportunity to kind of map fields that, in the cases where your schema doesn't match exactly what layer was laid down by the deployment tool. So when I've done all my mapping and everything looks good, I'm going to go ahead and hit run. And so this process is going to append those records to the layer in my organization. And I might have a regular process where I'm doing this as I get new crashes in. I might want to continue to load that new data into that layer. So the web map or the app that's available to the public is constantly being refreshed with new data. Or I might just want to use this new feature layer I've laid down in my org as my authoritative layer. So this is the layer that I use across the organization. Every different party who's interested in traffic crashes is always pointing to this internal layer that drives that dashboard, that drives the crash analysis that I would run in ArcGIS Pro. That's the authoritative layer in my organization now for traffic crashes. So it's appending those records, so I don't have to wait for it to complete. I can go ahead and just refresh the dashboard, and we'll see the latest records showing up now in that layer, in that dashboard. So when this loads up, I should see the widgets in the dashboard now reflect the data that's in that layer. As my filters are starting to update to reflect the data that's in the layer. Just to come back to Pro, just to show that the features have loaded up and now they're in the map. You can see them reflected here in my append completed successfully. You can see that the widgets have updated. So now I have the crashes that were loaded into that data set. I have my graphs that reflect the data that's in there. I can start to filter in my map and further filter down those widgets. So all of that capability that I showed in the Try It Live, now you have available in your organization with your data, and you can make this app available to the general public so they can start to consume it. So that was an example showing one of the dashboards. The process is very similar for the other apps that I showed you today. Deploy the app in your org. You can go into the app and configure it. You can configure the web map, the pop-up. You can add new fields, modify domains in your layers, load your data if necessary, and then you can share it to the parties, the stakeholders who would be interested in that app. Thank you.
Ultimately, as you said, right, Chris, what's going to happen is it's going to deploy a configuration of the solutions that you showed earlier today into the user's ArcGIS organization, and then they can begin to configure them to meet specific needs, right? Whether that's starting to perform the crash analysis or produce the high injury network or even deploy the fatal and serious crash dashboard.
Yep.
Great. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So thanks for joining us for today, and we look forward to seeing and hearing from you at our next meetup, which will be on Thursday, June 14th, where we'll be discussing what's coming in the ArcGIS for Local Government 2018 release in June. And we'll also talk about what's going on at the 2018 user conference as well. So until then, everyone, have a great afternoon.